Okay, well, after having played this once at Consim World Expo, a demonstration that Alan Emmerich actually provided for me. I guess the Victory Point Games guys went kind of in force and showed a lot of their games off, and it was a great experience, way to look at the mechanisms that they were using. I managed to get an opportunity to pick it up. Probably for just a teeny bit less than I could get it new. I picked it up used, but you know, saving a couple of bucks is always worthwhile. This game is called Hero Weehawken. It's about after Aaron Burr, a very interesting fellow, left the vice presidency of the United States and headed out west. It seems he was up to something, and it may or may not have had something to do with another fellow named James Wilkerson. He's in charge of the army out there. In this game, you're in the position of President Jefferson, trying to do a number of things. One of them is to advance certain agendas that you have in the United States as a whole, to set up your Virginia dynasty and make sure you get the correct successor and basically defeat the Federalists. A series of judicial reform actions that you want to get into place as well to have the judiciary more democratic aligned as opposed to Federalist, and also a pressuring of England. You have some other agendas as well that may come out that you have options to take care of, having to do with the Louisiana Purchase, for example. But the main goal, and what the game is really about, is finding Aaron Burr somewhere out here in the West. He's in one of these chits, and arresting him, and then having a set of charges that stick. Let's take a look at how this kind of works. So, there's a number of game aids here. Well, there's the map, there's the progress of Burr's plan, whatever that may be, and you don't know until you start detecting things. Here we have 3 of his conspirators, and there's this deck of 9 of these cards. 3 of them go there. It's kind of like Clue that way. The other 6 are buried in this deck. Now, of that 9, 5 of them are Wilkinson. And you have a list of different, is it here? Somewhere. Got a list of, yeah, here we go. Depending on who the conspirators are, and how many of them are Wilkinson, determines just how, what this plan is. And to some extent, and you have to charge him not just with a general plan, but very specific. We have a list of different things here, and the 2 treasonous ones are detach the Western U.S. and a coup d'etat. One of them only takes 1 Wilkinson card, 1 takes 2, and 3 guarantees that you have a coup d'etat, the most extreme of the possibilities here. The others are filibusters for the most part, largely against, well, all against Spain. Wilkinson had a lot of ties with Spain. He was actually on the Spanish payroll while he was a general. Not really well known. You know, he was keeping that little factor hidden. But it's not known whether or not he was simply developing ties there and collecting money and maybe involved in something on that side, or was selling out the U.S. entirely. He certainly was providing information. And each of these is a filibuster campaign. Now, there are different penalties for these 2. If you can get a trial for treason and get the maximum penalty, you can kill Burr. have him executed. If you are only going to charge him with a filibuster, the most you can give him is life in prison. And if you look at the trial track, though, there are sort of intermediate ones here. So, for example, you could get him in prison for a lesser time or have him censored. And it's not as valuable a victory condition, assuming you have things aligned right. It's also possible, though, that Burr's just heading out west to settle down in Mexico. And that's if his daughter, I believe, is one of the conspirators in this deck. Now, again, like in Clue, you try to collect information, but you don't get to query other players. Instead, you're querying the deck. And the way you do that is if you draw those conspirators in play, you get to hold on to them, and you know that they're not going to be in that 3 cards. Of course, if you draw a Wilkinson, that doesn't tell you a lot, because there could still be 3 of them in there, right? Okay. So, what we got? Well, there's a basic sequence of play, and we'll kind of try to, when I get to the playing, show this a little bit more. But basically, you draw a card, you take some effects from it, and one of the big ones is this prestige track, which at the beginning of the game, you start by rolling a die, and these tiny, tiny dice apparently didn't actually come with the game. They came with the version I have. The smallest dice I have, total sneeze dice, but you roll a die to see how many prestige points you have. And last time I played, I had very few, like maybe 2. This time I got 5 for a starting roll. That's kind of cool. Anyway, those prestige points are important because they allow you some options for this, as well as they can be used as expenditures for actions you want to take care of. All right. So anyway, the cards may give you prestige points. They may also progress the plan. The cards have an event on them, which takes place as well. If the card has a little redraw symbol on it, the turn's over. And that's it. You draw another card. If, on the other hand, if Burr is on the board after that redraw possibility, and there is a possibility when you reveal a card, some of them have a chance that you can spend prestige to get rid of that card. What you do is you reshuffle it and only it into the rest of the draw pile and draw another card. But that's expensive, and it's usually a way to get out of bad effects. I did that very little because I don't like paying. My last play, I got all kinds of cool things like the Virginia Dynasty in place, and I think I may have gotten all of these up. I know that's what I was aiming to do, but I ended up only having Burr acquitted, not exonerated, but didn't have much evidence at all on him, and I rolled kind of poorly in the trial. Now let's see what we got here. So if Burr has been revealed on the map already out of this pile, he starts making his way down to New Orleans. And once he gets closer in New Orleans, things kind of heat up a bit, and it's more likely to plan a launch. If he's hidden, I get a chance to advance whichever one of these agendas has gone the least. And in this case, that any one of them. And the way you do that is you roll a die, and if you get in the range listed on the chart, you can move forward into the next space. Eventually, you get the agenda completed. And in this case, this one gives you an extra prestige each turn. This one gives you a +1 over on the trial. And this one gives you an extra level of victory. Which are cool things, I guess. Okay. Then you hit the Jefferson phase, and this is where you really get to make decisions. I mean, some of the cards give you decisions, but for the most part, this is what you get. And this is where you get your point for the Virginia Dynasty. You're allowed to pay a prestige to try to advance any one of these 3 agendas that you want. For each prestige you pay, you can send a federal agent somewhere. And you can send them to 3 places, either the West, to a box out here, which is sort of the West. It counts as that for some effects. Or you can send them back to Washington. And the reason you'd send them back to Washington is there's some danger to having a lot of federal agents out there, but overall there's an advantage to it. Then you're allowed to make a search attempt, and that again costs you 1 prestige per attempt. But once you get a presidential proclamation, which costs 10 prestige to make, and that's marked here, you'd be putting this little chit out there, you would get free local authority bonuses. Okay, so you'd get 2 of them per turn searches using your federal agents that are out in the West to make these rolls. Now, the way you roll for this is basically you roll a die and try to get less than the federal agents. What do I have? That's the arrest one for local authorities as well. I'm trying to see. The search is here. Count the number of federal agents and Wilkinson conspiracy cards that you have in your hand. And you roll a die, and if you get less than or equal, you get to turn up one of these counters. Most of them, well, some of them are conspirators, in which case you can try to arrest that person and put them over in the dock back here. There's blanks, a couple of them. There's a riot, which causes everything to disappear and causes problems. And there may be other things as well. But some of them you want to turn up, some of them you'd rather not. You don't know what you're getting. Okay. Once you have some revealed conspirators, if you're in the space, which could be the West, or it could be this track for Burr, and you have a federal agent there, you can pay to arrest someone, and you roll on the local... Oh, you get 1 roll if you have the proclamation per turn to get a free attempt to arrest here. How does normal arresting work? Well, if you're not using the presidential proclamation, you get to just arrest him by paying. If you're using the local authorities with the proclamation, you have to roll on the die and see what happens, and that could cause the pile to remix, which would be kind of annoying. Okay. You can get a modifier to that one by spending, which would be kind of cool, but it defeats that free aspect, right? You're allowed to pay presidential prestige to try to move Wilkinson. I mean, you're commander-in-chief, right? You have to roll greater than a 6, or greater than or equal to a 6, but you get +1 per Wilkinson card that you hold, and you can move them 1 box in either direction. You can spend 3 to send some gunboats to New Orleans. That'll do 2 things. That reduces, I believe, the chance that a plan happens, but it also, and I may be mistaken about that, it may actually increase it, but it also reduces the efficacy of such a plan if it fires off. So let me see where the gunboats are. I'm not seeing them right off the bat. You know, it's the kind of thing you can hunt down. There we go. It hinders the expedition checks and the chance of the expedition with a -1. Okay. You can then spend 10 to get your presidential proclamation. And by the way, these go up to +10, so I can get them up to 19. Now, if Burr or Wilkinson enters one of these spaces, well, if Burr enters one of these spaces or Wilkinson, there's checks to see what happens. Possibility the expedition gets launched with Burr. Possibilities of effects on Spanish relations, the expedition. And then finally, when they're sitting in New Orleans, well, Burr has a chance of the expedition launching. Wilkinson has a chance of all kinds of interesting things. But among other things, you get to spend towards this to try to force Wilkinson to do more. Now, if you discard held Wilkinson cards after the die is rolled, you can add or subtract 1 from the die roll for each one. If you get a 5 or a 6, you get to go on the arrest Burr table, and it's possible on this that you kill Burr. Now, if you kill Burr, the amount of Wilkinson cards you're still holding are 10-point penalties each. If you end up arresting Burr either through this or through the federal agents, the trial immediately starts. And this whole part of the game goes away. Another opportunity is if the plan progresses to a certain point and launches, well, then there's a roll to see whether or not that succeeds. And that's rolled here. And you get certain victory point modifications. In general, you don't want the plan to be launched. The only case where that's different is if you choose to let Burr go, which is to say you've decided not to prosecute him, and you can just declare the game's over, I'm letting Burr go. And if this is the result, you get a decent amount of victory points for it because you showed some mercy to someone who wasn't doing anything wrong. Okay. Now the way the trial works is there's going to be evidence cards that you pull. And some of them are for the defense and some are for the prosecution. There's this kind of interesting byplay in the trial. Let me see if I have the sequence here. So first you decide which charge you're going to make on Burr. You have to have arrested him already. Then you roll both dice, the red and the blue. And you want high on your blue die, and you have modifier for the judicial reform. You compare them, and here's the thing. If the red's higher than the blue, you have to try to prosecute Burr. But if the blue's higher than the red, you've already got a compelling argument. You don't have to use anything. So let's say, for argument's sake, that we go to the prosecution step, which is red has more points than blue at this point, or even. At this point, you have to play evidence cards to force that above, to make red have to play. And then red has to play defense cards, and those are picked at random from the top. They were shuffled before, the evidence is not. And you add that to the die roll. If blue still has more, there's one conspirator once arrested who gives the defense a bonus. That could be used to sway it over. Now, if the defense cannot beat the evidence, well, the verdict moves one further up to its maximum. It can't go higher than what you're charging him with. They won't kill him if you charge him with jaywalking, even if it's John jaywalking. Okay, let's assume the defense beats the prosecution at that point. Well, then you have one more chance, and you can spend evidence cards again to force the points over. If you cannot manage to defeat the defense, well, you haven't pushed it, the trial's over. You've failed. Wherever you're sitting, that's the result you get. On the other hand, if you can go over, you mark the result one higher, and you start the process again, not with the charge, but with the arguments, which is the die rolls, the prosecution, defense, and rebuttal segment. Once you've come to a verdict, and you can adjust it based on things like, no, not that. So you revealed the three conspiracy cards. Determine what the conspiracy is. If you charged them with what? The exact correct one? The verdict goes up one level if it can. You still can't kill them for a filibuster. On the other hand, if only the type matches, there's no effect. If there's a type mismatch, the verdict gets dropped one. Your arguments obviously something was going on, but it doesn't sound like your prosecution had the right points. And then you go to the victory point phase, and the victory point phase is based on this. And it's based on what happens, where you are in the plan. You get points here towards your victory points, but in general what you want to do is you want to charge Burr with exactly what he's doing. It doesn't really matter what that is. Getting the exact match is more important than maybe overcharging him. So here, let's say you only charge him so all the filibusters have the same possible penalty. So if you caught the right one exactly, you would get more points by getting that right. It doesn't make sense to execute Burr if that wouldn't be the correct result. And it's especially bad if Burr is completely innocent there. You end up losing points for killing an innocent man, at least in history's viewpoint, even if it makes you happy. Let's see what else we got here. I think that's about enough. Yeah. Alright, well, we'll give this a try again. I've played it once before. I'm a little worried about how many times it's replayable. But then again, I don't play my games all that often, so I don't know how big a deal that is. But certainly from my first playing, I got the feeling of, well, you know, not a matter of there's no difference in the game. It's not like playing an ambush scenario where you know now who's hiding where. And, you know, I mean, I'm going to pick those first scenarios up from the one map that I had in my original game of Ambush, and I'm still going to vaguely remember them as they happen. Well, that's not going to really happen here because I've got this random deck, etc. It's not that I'm worried about. It's just how many times do you want to play this? And that depends. I'm not sure. But I'll probably get as much as I do out of most games. Alright, I'm going to put this one up and then we'll start playing.